Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome to the first lecture of week 6 on modernization and creative communication. So today we will learn something very interesting. Can you guess? Something related to a very primal experience of human beings. Yeah. So let's dive straight into today's topic with no fear, of course. The telephone uncanny. Now, the telephone, a revolutionary technology, reshaped the dynamics of human interaction. It brought people together across physical distances while simultaneously introducing an uncanny element, the separation of voice from the body. Let us explore how telephony, or how you say is the technology used in telephones, mediated communication in ways that promotes intimacy, ambiguity, and anxiety. Today we will juxtapose telephone's transformative potential with its disconcerting aspects, reflecting on its cultural, historical, and psychological impacts. At its inception, the telephone was a public medium where operators manually routed calls. I think this is something that you must have watched in the old days movies, right? Old movies, black and white ones, right? Often requiring users to identify themselves by name. This system emphasized community over privacy, as communication channels lacked singularity. Over time, the telephone industry sought to establish private, secure communication, paralleling broader societal shifts toward individualism. The integration of telephone numbers marked a big turning point. Though these were often associated with local geography, preserving a sense of communal identity. The transition to more anonymous and impersonal numbers reflected a growing emphasis on efficiency and privacy. Now, telephone operators occupied a unique cultural and operational position. Predominantly women, operators were tasked with ensuring efficient communication, embodying both human and mechanical qualities. Their roles were meticulously regulated with emphasis on speed, accuracy, and courtesy. Their roles were meticulously regulated. Why? Because operators were seen as liminal figures navigating the space between users and the technological infrastructures. This feminized labor with cultural perceptions of operators as mediators of emergencies, romances, and even life-altering decisions became very popular. So, in popular culture, often romanticized operators, portraying them as angels of mercy or matchmaking heroes, right? So at the same time, they were subject to dehumanizing expectations reduced to human machines or automata, as you can see I have mentioned in this slide, right? So the telephone, let us consider telephone, how it was treated as a symbol of intimacy and estrangement. The telephone was both a means of connection and a source of alienation. It facilitated romantic interactions and practical exchanges, but also introduced new anxieties about identity, about interactions, within the two. Without visual cues, callers were left to interpret the voice alone, leading to misunderstandings or feelings of disembodiment. So the absence of physical presence necessitated new etiquettes varying across cultures. For example, Dutch users, they prioritized immediate self-identification, while Americans adopted more relaxed norms. Now, let us find out this, romantic and erotic association of telephones. The telephone became a medium for romantic and erotic expressions. The disembodied voice held a sensual appeal, evoking feelings of closeness despite physical distance. However, this also brought vulnerabilities, as the telephone enabled intrusive or unwanted interactions. Now, there are negotiations with identities as well. The inability to physically verify the identity of a caller led to challenges in establishing trust and clarity. The mirrored broader, this concept or this kind of situation mirrored broader societal adjustments to mediated communication, where initial interactions required deliberate efforts to content, right? So what was there then? Loss of presence. And here Cooley's perspective becomes more important. You can read it there on the slide itself. As I have mentioned here, Cooley's perspective on communication in relation to distances is that communication redefined and made distances obsolete. So the absence of bodily cues rendered the telephone uncanny. Voices emerged without faces, creating a sense of dislocation. This lack of visual proximity disrupted traditional notions of intimacy and authenticity. Then comes this, anonymity and airiness. You are somewhere, you feel scared, or there is a fear that works within, right? The telephone's anonymity often led to unsettling, experiences. Prank calls. I hope most of you have heard about it, right? When you used to have landline telephones. Prank calls, heavy breathing, and failures to identify oneself invoked feelings of intrusion and unease. These behaviors foreshadowed modern challenges in cyberspace, such as trolling and online harassment, what we also call cyberbullying, right? Now, there is something that we have to understand: the fragmentation of dialogue. Telephonic conversations often felt disjointed, with participants expressing only half the interaction. Mark Twain humorously illustrated this in his satire, highlighting the confusion and absurdity of one-sided conversations. Such fragmentation highlighted the limitations of mediated dialogue compared to face-to-face communication, right? Now let's see how telephone has long been a character in the novels we read, the narratives we enjoy. Now here, did you know that the famous absurdist writer Kafka has dealt with telephone in some of his works? Have you read them? Now let's discuss some of his works here. In his parable The Neighbor, Kafka portrays the telephone as a site of paranoia and surveillance. The narrator's fear of being overheard reflects broader anxieties about privacy and the ambiguity of mediated messages. Similarly, in The Castle, Kafka explores the inscrutability of communication through a telephone exchange. The protagonist's uncertainty about whether he is truly recognized mirrors modern dilemmas of interpreting bureaucratic or digital interactions. So, there is a theme of miscommunication here. Kafka's insights resonate with the broader theme of miscommunication in telephone. Mediated interactions often leave individuals questioning the authenticity of intent of the other party. This ambiguity underscores the psychological toll of relying on imperfect communication channel. Again, we would be dealing with Dorothy Parker and the pathos of waiting. Again, this is another famous American author, Dorothy Parker, and we will be dealing with one of the most important work here, the monologue, A Telephone Call. This work exemplifies the emotional torment associated with telephonic communication. In this piece, a woman pleads desperately with God for man to call her, capturing the despair of unreciprocated desire and the uncertainty inherent in mediated contact. Her story reflects the broader theme of emotional dependency tied to the telephone and its role as a medium of deferred or absent connection. So Parker's portrayal underscores the loneliness and fragility of relationships mediated by technology. The act of waiting for a call symbolizes not just romantic yearning, but the existential uncertainty of whether one's voice, literal or metaphorical, will ever be answered or remain unanswered. So Parker's story does what? It explores gendered experiences of telephony. The act of waiting, hoping, and pleading was culturally associated with feminine vulnerability, contrasting sharply with depiction of men who controlled and initiated communication. These dynamics reveal how the telephone reinforced social expectations while also providing a means to challenge them. Even Huxley has explored this. Huxley, in his work Over the Telephone, provides a contrasting perspective where a man rehearses an elaborate invitation over the phone only to stumble and fail when the moment arrives. This comedic failure highlights the telephone as a site of both connection and miscommunication, where aspirations and realities often clash. Now, therefore, these authors who we have discussed so far have often depicted modern communication like telephone conversation as being fragmented and disjointed. Though telephone was regarded as the latest source of connection, but then these were some of the stark realities of those times, right? So it's almost as if both parties are talking, but their messages exist in two separate worlds that never fully connect, right? So in these stories, we see the psychological strain that comes from trying to interpret these fragmented exchanges. These struggle, or this particular struggle, often leads to what? Leads to feeling of paranoia and mistrust, as people are left unsure about the true intentions behind the messages they receive. Especially what Kafka had dealt with. Kafka wrote about bureaucracies and communication breakdowns feels incredibly relevant today. In our world of large organizations, digital platforms, and automated systems, miscommunication is a frequent issue. Kafka's vision of these challenges reflects on our own struggles with technology and bureaucracy, where clarity is often lost and we struggle for this clarity, right? So let us now sum up what we learned so far. While the telephone extended the auditory range, it eliminated the visual and physical cues, making communication more challenging. So the voice became the sole medium of expression, necessitating greater effort to convey emotions and intentions. The telephone, I think, fragmented the traditional concept of dialogue into two isolated halves. This disjunction fostered a sense of estrangement as interactions occurred in a virtual space detached from physical reality. The uncanny aspects of telephony often mirrored psychological conditions such as schizophrenia or paranoia. Instances of static dropped calls or disembodied voices exacerbated the feelings of alienation, reflecting the fragile nature of mediated communication. So the telephone's uncanny qualities foreshadowed challenges in contemporary communication and communication technologies. Like the internet, telephony raised concerns about anonymity, surveillance, and the erosion of personal boundaries. So the struggle to decipher telephonic messages parallels the broader human challenge of what? Of interpreting ambiguous signals, whether in bureaucracy or digital interactions or interpersonal exchanges. Individuals grapple with the tension between clarity and misinterpretation. Therefore, the telephone, as explored in this lecture, the telephonic uncanny, represents both a technological triumph and a source of existential reflection. In the previous lecture, where we were dealing with letters, we found so many faults with the letter as a medium, and with the advent of technology, with the advancement of technology, we came up with telephone. But see, as if the technology advanced, but our problems remained where we were with, right? We were dealing with the same kind of issues. So it connected individuals, of course, across vast distances. It took lesser time than if the mails or the letters took long time to reach the receiver. It in that sense, telephone calls took shorter times, yet its very nature introduced new forms of alienation and ambiguity. By examining its historical, cultural, and philosophical dimensions, the text sheds light on the complexities of mediated communication, offering valuable insights in the human experience in an increasingly connected world. Thank you.